Hello everyone, it's Matthew from Duthie Aquatics. I just want to start my video with a brief tour of the horrendous mess that is my fish room before going into what I hope is a very comprehensive video on Camallanus Red Worms and how to treat them. So at the moment you can just see some of my guppy tanks, which I have a lot because I love guppies. In here is some shrimp, Japanese, well, they're crossed with a guppy, but the Japan blue endlers, some clown loaches, my half decent tuxedo koi guppies, my stressed out black bar female endlers. I'll get into why they are looking so terrible in just a moment. My longfin albino whistlenose, my other clown loach, and some baby panda guppies, dragon guppies in there. The big 5-foot tank I don't want to talk about. My lovely plant holding tank with my platinum guppies. So in here I have quite a few plants that I'm converting from hydroponic grown setups to fully submerged growth, hence the power head filter spurting out CO2 that I've got hooked up here going into the outlet. I'll do another video on that later. My huge colony of French blue star endlers. My backup colony for the dragon guppies. There's too many males in here for the amount of females I had, so some of the males got some nicely shredded tails. All the way down the bottom here are the tiger endlers, some big females at the front. My other colony of the tuxedo koi guppies, which I've sold most of, so there's not many left in there. Now I have here is my quarantine / breeding rack. Each one of these tanks has got something different in here. So over here is one spotted blue eye female and one placat male betta. In here is another clown loach taking care of some snails for me, and a platinum guppy cross. If you'll turn to the side, you'll see nice yellow streaks in the tail, but he wants to face the camera instead. Some cherry barbs I've just gotten in, so they're a little bit skinny, haven't really coloured up. My plants I've got to sort out. Here is my gardener eye killifish and their spawning mop, a little male here, 2 adult females. And that's that little guy's siblings all in here. I had really good success breeding a couple of pairs of them, so I'll do a video on how to do them later. My Bosmani rainbow fish in the 20-litre tank with the spawning mop, so I'm going to pull that out soon. Neon tetras I've just gotten in as well, trying to fatten them up. My baby wagtail platies and some stir-by corridoras. Here are the blue pancheks or wonder killifish. In this horrendous mess of a tank, if I can get in there, is all the female bettas with some salt and pepper cory cats which I've stirred up the bottom. Just some Variatus platy fry. Here is just a whole bunch of bucephalandra I'm trying to grow out, some endlers. Most of the tanks down the bottom here are actually empty, apart from that one just here, which is again full of snails and some pygmy cories. And here's some more platinum guppies, which I've successfully treated for Camallanus Red Worms, and I'll get into that in just a moment. Here is my crypts and swords, they're just kind of in shambles because I had to catch out some angelfish today. My tetra tank with some clown loaches. My little cacatoides here. He's a bit skinny, hopefully he'll start eating some more food soon. Assorted male endlers and Anubius / crypts / Bulbitis and Java fern, some little Bucephalandra here, rosy barbs down here, huge school of tiger barbs just in here. Here is a Daphnia culture. Probably can't really see any movement at the moment. I've just restarted this culture, so I'll do another video on how to do them in the 20-litre bucket soon. Bottom tank is just the N-class black bar endlers. That's Scarlet Temple, also known as Telenantheria. Dwarf hairgrass here. This stuff is quite tall because it's been immerse grown. And then down here is aquatically submerged grown Alternantheria Renickii Red Mini. So if you want some information on how to grow them, just leave a comment below and I'll do a video on how to do them. Sorry, kicking the tripod, so there's going to be some shaky cam. But these tanks here have been worth their weight in gold for trying to deal with the red worm epidemic. I haven't actually had that many problems with Camallanus Red Worms, but I have had them in the small tank down there, and this tank here, as well as this tank in here. There were 3 tanks that were quite heavily affected, as well as this 5-foot tank which has nothing in it because I haven't got enough medication to treat 5-foot tank yet, so I've got to rip it apart and treat it differently. So what I had to do to treat the worms was first identify which tanks had them, and you'll notice little red strings poking out of the fish's cloaca. So this female right here was the one that I noticed in this tank that had them in it. If the camera will focus, thank you. And you'll see now nothing is poking out, so I had to treat it with Presequentinol and Levamisole, a mixture of both of those together. And I had to put that treatment in the tank for 3 days. So a lot of people will say that the Levamisole will break down with the light being on. I haven't actually encountered that problem, so I don't know whether or not that's whether or not you use a different mixture or because I use a slightly higher dosage. But I didn't run into that problem at all with my fish. The biggest thing I have found with succeeding with it is making sure that you've fed your fish well beforehand and feed them intermediately through the treatment, because quite often when you're dosing fish for Camallanus, you'll find that they don't want to actually eat any food whilst the medication's in the water, so it's really important that they've eaten before you've commenced the treatment, because they need something to go through their body to help push out the worms, because the Levamisole doesn't actually kill the worms, it stuns them, and then it allows the fish to naturally pass them through their intestines. One thing I have found with Camallanus Red Worms through my extensive research is that they do require a intermediate host to actually go through their larval stage and then be infected or be able to infect fish. So in the wild, the way they do that is through a invertebrate. So you'll see a nice Malaysian trumpet snail right here, and that brings me to why I actually hate snails in the aquarium. Is they act as a perfect intermediate host for Camallanus red worms. They will eat the eggs that they expel from the fish, and then they will go through a larval stage inside the snails. They can also use cherry shrimp, but they're much more prevalent with snails. Then the snails will pass out the little worms that the fish will ingest when they're picking food up from the bottom or sifting through their own waste, and that'll be how you'll get a huge infection in your tank. So what I had to do before I even treated with Levamisole was I had to get a copper sulfate treatment, which is why these poor girls in here look terrible. I had to double dose that for it to actually be effective at killing the snails. So the product I used was actually by Blue Planet, and it's called Snail Rid, and I found the only way to actually get a result with killing the snails was I had to double dose it. If you do that with the shrimp, however, copper sulfate will kill the shrimp a lot faster than it will ever kill a snail. I had to leave the treatment in for a week before doing a water change to actually kill the snails. Otherwise, you'll find all it will do will stun them. And then when you do a water change, anyone that didn't die in those couple of days will just get out of their shell and start moving about like nothing happened. The only snails I actually like are these mystery snails or golden apple snails, depending on what you'd like to call them. But I separated them from being with any fish long before I had any problems, so the apple snails weren't any issue. If you've had them in your tank and you've got Camallanus, then you're probably going to want to get rid of your apple snails and then start again with them. I'll have some video footage of my actual treatment. These videos come way after I've actually succeeded with the treatment for the worms, but they seem to have a 4-week life cycle. So they'll go through the stage of infecting the fish to protruding out of the fish and dropping eggs or whatever that the snails are going to ingest in 4 weeks. So usually when you treat your tank, you're going to want to treat it once a week for 4 weeks to make sure you've truly interrupted that life cycle. And then in between the treatments, after about 3 days, you're going to want to do a good gravel vacuum. So that's why all these pots are uprooted here. So I did a very thorough gravel vac through all of these to make sure I'm getting out any of the dormant worms or anything that they've expelled, such as the eggs or any snails that it might be hiding. Just trying to get rid of all of that, and that's been a very huge part of the successful treatment that I've found. Sorry, I'm just trying to move the camera so that you can see something that's a bit more interesting rather than just listening to my monotone voice. So you won't find all fish that you buy from the pet store will have them, but more often than not, if you're buying platies, mollies, guppies from a chain store, they 90% chance they're all going to be buying from the same wholesaler. If the wholesaler has the worms, which is quite a high chance in this day and age, because a lot of farms aren't doing their due diligence in treating their fish, they'll more than likely have the worms infected. So it's really important to have a quarantine system in place for any new fish, because some fish really don't respond well to the treatment. So I've found that with heavily infected fish, like what I'll show you in a minute in my video footage, when you have quite a few worms poking out of the end of a fish, when you treat the fish, there's a 50% chance of mortality for that fish, but you're better off treating it than not treating it. You'll find that if you treat them successfully, your birth rate for if you're breeding fish will be much higher. You'll get better growth out of them, and you will just have far fewer problems with other diseases as well, because the fish's immune system isn't going to combating parasites. So you'll find with most fish, they will be quite bloated. Like you'll see some of the ones in here, including the males, are fat, but that's because I'm feeding a really high protein food, because most people that buy my fish are just going to feed them flakes, so I just want them to have the best head start before they go out the door. But you'll find that the male guppies especially will be quite chesty, unless you're feeding really good quality food. That usually won't happen unless there's an underlying issue, whether that be a tapeworm infestation or Camallanus Red Worms. So the worms themselves are actually clear. The red color comes from them feeding on the blood of the fish. So even though they occupy the intestinal tract of the fish, they actually are feeding off the blood. and it pretty much is 100% a death sentence for whatever fish is infected with them, especially if it's a small fish, because there's only so many worms inside the fish that they can actually take before the insides will start rupturing or they've just taken too much blood. So you will find that the fish will pass out red worms that will sink to the bottom. There's a really good way of, if you've only got a couple fish that you've noticed, I use these breeding traps, and you'll see that they've got the grate at the bottom. I hang it on the side of the fish tank. The adult fish that I'm treating will go inside there, and as they pass out the worms will fall through there, so the fish cannot re-ingest them and reinfect themselves with them. I don't know whether or not that would actually reinfect the fish, but I did it as a precaution just because I don't want to take any chances. So if you're going to treat your fish and you have shrimp and snails, separate your shrimp first. I would just cut your losses with the snails, or if they're pond snails, just try and kill them with copper sulfate treatment. But the shrimp I'd put into a separate tank and treat them with levamisole as well, because at least in my experience that hasn't been a toxic chemical to treat the shrimp with either, and hopefully they'll just pass out any of the larval ones that are inside them. And if you quarantine your shrimp for 4 weeks, that they've definitely passed them out with a regular gravel vac and water change in their tank as well, you probably should be fine with putting them back in with your fish. But these guys, I treated them as well, and since I've treated them, you'll see the males have actually gotten a lot more color. The females are actually coloring out a lot better as well since I've treated them, and they're just growing way better now that they've been treated for both tapeworm and Camallanus red worm. And this horrendous mess of a tank is all stuff on hold for someone who's coming tomorrow to pick up their fish. So hopefully that's quite a bit of information for you. Please forgive the horrendous mess that's in here. I'm potting up plants at midnight as well as trying to make a quick video, because I have one planaria video on my channel at the moment and it's been there for 8 months. So please, if you have any questions, leave a comment. Please like and subscribe, it will help me out immensely. And I will leave off this video with some footage of my infected platinum guppies so you can see what they look like, as well as a few photos of the actual stuff that I could find on the internet about them. Thank you for watching.